Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Perform Happy podcast. I'm excited to meet somebody online that is actually not very far from me locally. I love it. So, another fellow Bay Area mental performance coach, Joey Hewitt. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca. Excited to have some good conversations here.
Yeah. So Joey was a former professional basketball player who, and this is what really drew me to you, who struggled with confidence and anxiety as a player. So I love to start with that because that's why I do this work. I think it's why you do this work is because we're like the wounded healers. We help the kids like us. So I'd love to hear your sport journey and how, someone who struggled with confidence and anxiety ended up a professional basketball player.
Definitely. I never would have assumed that would have been my profession at any point in my life, even when I was a year away from it. I grew up playing basketball and football. Those are my two favorite sports. But I was what they call a late bloomer. So I was always very short. And physically, I just was smaller than everyone else. And at the time, I didn't understand that it affected my mentality or my mindset, but now that I'm looking at it reflectively, it definitely did. I had a lot of mental issues in the confidence and the anxiety realm because of my physical limitations. So I was always, struggling to, get by people in basketball. I was struggling to play defense in basketball because people were just bigger and stronger than me. So I naturally used that as kind of like my outlet or my cop out as a way to be like, oh, I'm never going to make it. I'm not good enough. I'm too short. I'm too small. And, especially when I got to around high school was when it hit its low point because, that's the time when everyone's, especially males, are going through puberty. A lot of people are maturing, they're growing, they're getting all of the skills and the athleticism that I just simply didn't have. So when I was playing sports, especially in high school, I really, really struggled. I would constantly avoid any situation. Like I was just in an avoidance mindset. So I never wanted the ball. I never wanted to be on the court. I just wanted to be on the bench. Anytime I did get on the court, I had a fear of failure, a very, very strong fear of failure, where I didn't want to make any mistakes. Anytime I would get on the court, my whole goal was to not mess up. Um, I had a lot of skills. I was very talented. I worked on my game all the time. I loved the game of basketball and I loved the game of football. I started to really transition more into basketball around high school. And I put in all the work, but I still didn't see results. So it got to about my junior year of high school where I almost was just put on the varsity team because we didn't have another good player. I just kind of got lucky in the situation I was in, and I got put on the varsity team and I was starting. And I really, really struggled the beginning of that year because I had the same problems. I was focusing on not making mistakes. I was super nervous every game. I didn't have any tools to deal with this stuff um, until my junior year of high school, where I started to finally learn about the mindset stuff. And this actually comes from my high school coach, who I still actually, funny to this day, I coach with him now. So he helped me a lot just learning how to, see life lessons through sports. And I started to really understand that, like, hey, it's not about the results, it's about the fact that I get to play with all these great guys, with my teammates, with my friends. And I started to enjoy the process more. I started to enjoy what I was doing more. And then I started to play well. So my first real experience with the mental game happened with the concept of joy, learning how to fight anxiety and learning how to fight that nervousness with joy was the first real like aha moment for me, where I realized like, oh wow, you can actually just have fun and play better. So I took that and I ran with it, and I actually had a very good senior year, and then I was able to play in college. And then when I got to college, this is for basketball, I hit another rock bottom because once you get to college, it's another step up. Everything changes. Everyone's good. The coaches they hold you way more accountable. It's way more intense. And I got to college my first year. I played Division III at Whitman College, and I assumed I was going to play right away, just because it's Division III. Like I thought, oh, I'm good enough. I can play right away. I didn't. I was on the end of the bench, at the very, very end of the bench. And I started to hate basketball. I started to be like, I don't even want to be here. I got really homesick. I really, really struggled. And that was definitely the rock bottom for me. And that's when I actually got in touch with a mental performance coach by the name of Graham Betchart, if you're familiar with him. He's got a long beard. He's a Zen master. He is like my mentor. He helped me so much. And when I was in college, that was when I really learned about all of the mental skills that really, really helped me with confidence and anxiety. And I can get into a few of those later, but I'd say the two biggest ones that helped me were just the ability to be present, like just be in the moment, be where your feet are, and then focus on what you can control. I think those two things were what really, really helped me when I got to college. Just learn how to succeed, learn how to perform consistently. A lot of it was because I was never in the present and I was always focusing on things I couldn't control. So once I figured that out, my college career went way better. I started to play more, I started to succeed more. And then from there, the ball was rolling. I really learned, I figured it out. I feel like it all clicked. And then, I had a great college career. And then I was lucky enough to go play overseas in Mexico. And I was in Australia and England as well. So I had a great experience with basketball, but it definitely wasn't all peaches and roses. It was a very rocky road. And that's why I'm in the field that I am, because I struggled for 90% of my career. I just figured it out in the last like 10%, 5% of it. So that's a little bit of background around my story and my sports journey.
Yeah. So I love so I also had the wrong stature for my sport. I was too tall. So it's an interesting, no matter what, you're like not quite right for your sport. And then you get this sort of, oh, well, that's why I can't be successful. And I leaned on that my entire career and it took me out. So anyone out there who's feeling like you're too tall, you're too short, you're too old, you're too young, it's really just a belief system, I mean, so are you now 6'10"?
I did grow. That's the thing is I hear it too, Rebecca. Like I'm 6'3", so I actually grew to a pretty solid height for a basketball player. But when I first grew, I still had the same mental issues. I still was like, I'm not big enough or I'm too short. It's like I'm not too short anymore, but I still had the same frame of thinking. And that's just a testament to the power of habits and the power of our brain. Our brain really can make us believe something that isn't fully aligned with reality. It's just the truth. So, like you're saying, like if you're too short, too tall, it's really about what do you believe that does to you? If you believe that that is a hindrance to your performance, then you're probably going to be hindered by it. But if you are like, you know what, I can still succeed from it, and you have that belief system deep in place, and you've worked on that, and you've trained that by writing it down, by believing it, by affirming it, by visualizing it, then you can really start to break free from that. And I did. I truly feel like I don't have that anymore. One, because physically I'm not short or small, but it's more than physical because I wasn't short and small and I still had the mental block. So I learned how to get through that through mental skills.
Yes, it's those stories we tell ourselves that just they give us the out. If I walk into exercise class and I'm like, "Oh, I'm a little tired," that mental state runs my class. Every single time I'm like, "Oh, well, I can't," or "I'm a little off," or "I'm a little whatever." It's like if you walk into your training facility with that, like, "Oh, here's why I can't succeed," it's gonna win versus going like, "I'm tall, I got long lines. Nobody looks like me on beam. Nobody looks as good as me on beam." If I could find that, like, what's the gratitude, the joy in what is and where my feet are. Okay, so I'd love to go back to, like, sophomore in high school you. If somebody would have come up to you and said, "Bro, you just need to have a good time. Like, where's your joy?" Would they have been able to talk you into that, or did you have to find that on your own?
I think that would have helped because I did hear that from my high school coach around my junior year. But I think at the time I was so caught up in just like that belief system that like I can't have fun because I can't play well. So I think the framing of it is so important for us, for parents and for coaches, because for me as an athlete, it's like I know I'm supposed to have a good time. Like that's the whole reason I got into sports, but I want to play well. I want to be good. So it's hard to have a good time if I'm not playing well. And that is the hardest thing for coaches and for parents to help their athletes with is because it's like a chicken or the egg conundrum. Do you play well because you're having fun, or do you have fun because you're playing well? It should be the former. You need to have fun first and then play well. And so much of that is due to a fixation on results. The reason why I was like that my sophomore year of high school was because I was so locked in on playing well and getting a college scholarship and playing in college, even though I was like, there's no chance I can do it. But I had nothing else to do in my life. I literally was like, this is the only thing I like was basketball, and I'm 5'6". So I think at the time I would have heard something along the lines of like, you need to have fun and actually enjoy the process. Like enjoy practices, enjoy the fact that you get to play with your teammates. Don't try and enjoy the results. Don't try and enjoy like scoring 10 points or, like getting a perfect score. Like that's never going to satisfy your soul. You might think it does when you have a good score, when you have one good performance, but then you have a bad performance and you realize everything about your identity is now connected to those performances. So
Yeah.
I would say that would have been the right way to approach it for a young kid like me who was struggling with having fun.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I mean, everybody's so wrapped up in scores. So it's hard to be not scoring and feel confident. So for the kid in the slump out there, for the kid who's like, it has been 6 months since I have felt proud about my sport. What would you say are kind of the first couple things that you would do to unslump this kid, to Dr. Seuss reference? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I've went through plenty of these. I've went through some terrible slumps where, like, when I was playing in college, I had a slump at the end of the season where it was playoffs, where it was most important, and I still to this day have to like accept that and live with that. My last ever game in college, I fouled out and I had a terrible game. So I know what it's like to go through slumps and get through them. But I also know what it's like to be able to accept slumps. And I think that's the piece of it that a lot of people struggle with is being able to accept it. Like if you're not playing well, if you're not performing well, so often we want to push that away because it just attacks our ego as an athlete. Our ego is like almost like something like we nurture. It creates our confidence. It gives us that belief. So it's hard to kind of find that acceptance sometimes for a slump. But I think for me, what really helped is being able to understand one, that a slump is nothing physical. A lot of people will try and put in more work or they'll try and physically try and fix the slump when it is a mental thing. It's not a physical issue. And to me, it's really just a matter of focus. The more you focus on something that is a result or something that is uncontrollable, the more likely you are to perpetuate that slump, the more likely you are to kind of live in that slump for longer. So for me, what really helped was changing my focus, redirecting my focus. So for me in basketball, let's say I couldn't make a shot, I couldn't shoot. I was slumping and shooting. Well, I'm going to focus on being a really good teammate. I'm going to focus on making sure my teammates are all confident, making sure I'm playing as hard as I possibly can, and I'm talking really loudly while I'm on the court. If I focus on those things, the results part kind of just happens naturally. It's the beauty of sports is it's so much based on muscle memory. Our mind usually just gets in the way more than actually helps us. So learning how to redirect your focus onto something that is one, controllable, and two, something that has nothing to do with the thing you're slumping in, I think are the two best ways to kind of help yourself in that situation.
Yes. Yes. And I was thinking that, when you are just bummed out about your performance, if you take a moment and you put joy on your teammates and you pump them up and you take that on as your role, that's going to fill your cup. That's going to make practice fun because those kids are going to be like, wait, where's Rebecca today? I need my hype girl. Whether or not I'm doing my back handspring on the beam, I was the most positive kid on my team, but I thought I didn't have value because I couldn't perform because I was afraid. But to be able to, I think for coaches and parents to turn that around and be like, you're the most valuable kid on that team. Because without you, they aren't themselves,
Right.
and if you're like, all right, well, this isn't my year physically, mentally right now, or this isn't my day, but I'm going to make it so fun to be around me. And that's going to bring the joy in me, bring the joy in them. And the next thing you know, they're encouraging me so much that it's just like this big joy fest. And oh my gosh, I feel like, okay, I'm going to go try it. I got a little courage in me because my team is so tight because of what I brought to it. I think that's a great, especially for kids who are injured, just such a great way to redirect your energy on just like bringing that team up. It
Definitely.
will pay dividends 100%. So, okay. So I'd love to talk a little bit about imagery. That's something that you bring up a lot in your content. So, for someone who's wanting to start an imagery practice, what are kind of the most important parts to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this is another piece of the mental game that a lot of people get wrong. A lot of people don't really understand that, here's the thing. Everyone is going to imagine or visualize positive things. If they're before a game, before a performance, you're going to probably want to be like, okay, I should visualize positive things. I want to make sure things go right. But how often do we imagine or visualize what could go wrong and then how you're going to respond to it? And that's something I got from Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps I have a lot of his stuff, his content on my page because he's a big proponent of the mental game, and is specifically visualization or imagery. He is a huge I actually think he spearheaded this, or he's the person I found this from. I've never seen anything like it until I saw the videos of him talking about visualizing what could go wrong. You know, he has a great example of him talking about when his goggles filled up with water in the 2008 Olympics during his 200-meter fly. And that happened in the first 50 meters. So in that moment, a lot of people would panic, but he visualized not that specific instance, but he visualized a lot of negative things that could have happened leading up to the event. And that allowed him to be mentally prepared. He knew the stroke count he had for his best 50 flies. So he just relied on that. So for me, imagery and visualization is a great pregame thing. It's a great thing to do before you have a performance. You know, Michael Phelps would do it up to a month in advance. So you can do it as early as you'd like. But one thing I would recommend to all athletes is don't just visualize the positive, don't just visualize the negative. Keep yourself balanced. And when you do imagine the negative, always, always, always finish with a positive response to that negative thing. How are you going to get out of that hole that you just imagined? Because I think the thing that people normally do is they visualize positive things and then they'll visualize negative things, sometimes by accident, which I've done before, where I like visualize myself and I cannot make a shot when I'm imagining myself shoot, which is okay. It's common. Our brain does that. But it's in that situation, just be adaptable. Okay, if I don't make it, I'm going to sprint back on defense, or I'm going to talk really loud and remind myself I got the next one. The more you visualize how you get out of negative situations, the more prepared you will feel for anything that comes up. It really does. It's a great thing for me. You know, I struggled a lot with anxiety. I still do, but I struggled a lot with anxiety on the basketball court. Something that really helped me was being able to imagine my responses. And Graham really helped me with that. My mentor and my mental coach, of just like visualizing what could go wrong and how you're going to get out of it. Now you show up to a game with just like armor. You're like, whatever happens, I'm good. Like I can figure it out, rather than it's got to go well today. I have to play. I have to perform well today. That causes a lot of stress and pressure. So I like to use imagery and visualization as a way to keep myself grounded and keep myself balanced. I'm going to see the good, I'm going to see the bad, but either way, I'm going to figure it out no matter what happens.
Yes, that reminds me of Alex Honnold, I think is his name, from Free Solo. He's the guy who climbed the vertical face in Yosemite with no ropes, like 1,000 feet, 1,000,000 feet. It was like the highest no ropes climb, completely deadly, right? And when he
Right.
would imagine, so he would climb it with the ropes and mark out his path, and then he would visualize every single grab. And when he got to the top in his mind with no ropes, he would imagine full panic, full panic. And with the panic, he would imagine himself choosing where his hands would go and where his feet would go, while completely engulfed in, this fight or flight response. So it's such a great example of using, if you're going to get up there on that beam and be terrified, then be ready for, okay, what's that going to feel like? And then how am I going to navigate through it in that moment where the judges are watching? And you watch your body move through the motions, even though the panic is there. And if you can feel that happening, then you've got control. Yeah. Or imagine, okay, you split the beam. Great. Then what are you going to do? You're going to take a breath, you're going to get up and you're going to nail it, or any of that. Like, you're going to have that negative thought come up and then you're going to manage it to be able to go into reality of that this isn't going to necessarily be easy. I think that's such a great tip. Like, when
Yep.
you're ready for all of the options and you're like, bring it on. If I get scared, I know what to do. If I fall, I know what to do. And then you have less tension, less stress, and you're less likely to fall. You're less likely to make mistakes because you're like, it's fine. Whatever happens is going to be okay. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so good. Okay. Then you also talk a lot about like using breath.
Mhm.
And so when the panic is arising, so obviously when he's up there panicking, he's probably got a breath strategy or two that he's going to lean on to relax the nervous system. What are some of your favorite techniques for when you're feeling the panic and you really want to get kind of back into your feet? You want to get back into your body.
Yeah. My personal favorite that I teach with a lot of young athletes specifically, uh, because I think I want to preface this a little bit by saying it's one thing to just take a breath, but I think the goal with all this in the mindfulness specter is to like focus on your breath. If you can actually be focusing on your breath while you're breathing, that's what, we define as a mindful breath. If you just take a breath and all you're thinking about is how anxious and nervous you are, it's probably not going to have the same effect. So being able to focus on the breath is my goal. Every single time I take a breath, or every single time I try and relieve anxiety with that breath, I need to be focused on that breath. So for me, I love having what I call anchoring phrases attached to the breathing. And this is something that, I every time I teach athletes meditation or how to breathe, I start with this. It's called smell the roses, blow out the candles. Because every time when you imagine yourself smelling a rose, you are inhaling through your nose. Every time you imagine yourself, I always kind of put it on the table as like a birthday cake full of candles. That's what I like to see. So you can imagine you have to really extend your exhale to get all those candles. And it's really what you're doing is you're exhaling through your mouth. So I like to do saying in my own head, using visualization and imagery with it. So it has an element of self-talk and visualization to it of smell the roses. I say that in my own head as I inhale through my nose and imagine myself smelling a rose. And then I say in my own head, blow out the candles as I imagine myself blowing out a birthday cake full of candles as I exhale through my mouth. That is a great way to help athletes, young athletes, learn what that means to focus on your breath, because that's kind of an abstract concept. The whole idea of mindfulness and being present is kind of confusing for people, growing up. I think it's hard for us to understand because we're so well versed in it. But I remember being, just learning about this stuff. I was like 17, 18 when I first learned about this stuff. And I remember meditation was really hard. I was like, I don't even know if I'm doing it right. I don't feel anything. I don't really know like, does this work? And I realized so much of it was just because I wasn't focused on my breath. I was breathing, but I wasn't focused on my breath. So that's one of my favorites as a way to help people learn how to actually focus on your breath because you're saying phrases that bring your focus to your breath. Then the other one I really like, I got this from Kevin Love, who's a NBA player. He does what's called double inhale breathing. So he'll breathe in through his nose twice. The first one is kind of like 90% capacity. And then the last 10, or the second inhale is the last, however much you can inhale anymore. And then you do a slow, long, controlled exhale through your mouth for about 6 to 8 seconds. So those are the two I really like. The first one is more if I'm in a confined space, if I have some time. The second one is more if I just am on the court, if I'm in a performance, if I just can only take one breath, I'm going to go with a double inhale breath.
I love that you refer a lot to really great athletes. So obviously, you are studying great people. And I've heard this theory that if you want to be great, study great people. You want to be rich, study rich people. You want to be an amazing athlete, study amazing athletes. And it links into this idea of you got to control your inputs as an athlete, your sleep, your nutrition, your hydration, and what you're putting in your mind. So I imagine based on, what you're putting out in your content that you are studying great athletes all the time. And I would encourage anybody out there, if you're spending time scrolling your Instagram and it's making you feel bad, start scrolling something else. Like limit your feed to only the people who have got the motivational content. So what are your tips on, if people want to really immerse themselves in the great ideas of great athletes, what should they do? Where do they go?
Yeah, I think, my Instagram is at Find Joe Flow. It has a lot of, that's all I post is great athletes and great coaches and just people in the sports world talking about the mental game. I have learned a lot from that. You're right. It's crazy. I've been doing that now for almost 4 years at Instagram. So it's been a lot of grinding. It's been a long journey of just like posting stuff with no results, which is, the essence of our field. So I loved it. But it's crazy because the more I post, the more like I said, I see similarities. I see common themes. I've posted probably 200 different athletes on my page. So I've seen so many different perspectives, but it's crazy how many similar things you'll hear. And they all, the biggest thing that I think I can take from pro athletes that I've learned about the mental side is like two things. It's a two-part answer. One, they all love the game. Every single person who I post loves what they're doing. It's not a matter of they love the results they get. No, they love every single part of what they do. And that's something that, I had to learn as well through basketball. I only cared about the results. Once I started to learn how to love the process, and I learned how to love the preparation. I loved going to practice. I loved working out. Like that's when I started to see more results. So these pro athletes get all these results because they fall in love with the process. They fall in love with the little intricacies and details within their sports. And then two, the second part to that is they are okay if they don't succeed. They understand that sports are it's a dog eat dog world. You're not going to win all the time. They are just really good at using those feelings of like, oh, I didn't win today or I didn't succeed today. They are really, really good at using those feelings and applying them to their next practice or their next performance. And that's, in my opinion, the biggest separator for athletes is you're going to have bad days. You're going to have a bad practice. You're going to have a stretch where you're not performing well or when you don't feel like yourself. What do you do in those moments? If you are just like panicking, everything's done, I can't figure it out, I'm broken, and you just have no faith and no trust in yourself and you don't enjoy it anymore, you don't have any love for your sport anymore, well, it's going to be tough to get out of that. But if you just stay consistent with your love for the game and you stay consistent with your passion for just showing up every day and trying to get better and putting in effort, eventually things will work itself out and that those results will start to realign. But that's the biggest separators. People struggle with that because what I just said is really hard to do. It's hard to like keep that motivation and that passion when things are not going well. So those are the things I can take with me from pro athletes. They're just really good at loving their sport and really, really good at responding or staying resilient when things are not going their way.
Yes. Yeah. So it makes me think of one of the most successful people I know. I'm biased with my dad. He's a filmmaker and he has made terrible films because he loves it. And he's made great films because he loves it. And he's made stupid films and successful ones and horrible bombs. But I mean, I look at this guy and I'm like, he's, in his 60s and this man will not stop because he loves it. And he's not trying to be successful. That's the crazy thing about it. It's like people are like, how do you do it? And he's like, don't try to go be famous, just love making movies.
Yeah.
And if you apply that to sports, don't try to go be famous and don't try to go get a college scholarship, just go love playing your sport. Just love playing your sport, be someone who helps other people around you love playing your sport, and then you'll never want to stop. And then it's just a matter of like walking through open doors at that point, which it sounds like in your story that you finally found the love and you're like, cool. Oh, pro, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds good because you finally are just like, wait, I love this. I can be where my feet are. I can control what I can control. The rest of it, I will willingly let go, pump up my guys on the court. Like, this is a good time. What door do I want to walk through next? Like, what a beautiful way to approach your sport. I think a lot of you stressed out girls out there and boys can definitely take some tips from that. So, okay, so other things that you've written about are, gratitude and affirmations. And so, I love this kind of concept of feeding your mind. You're feeding your mind these awesome stories in your feed and things you're looking for. I'm sure you're like scouring YouTube for like the great things that people are saying. How can we feed our mind with tools like gratitude and affirmations to keep that positive vibe flowing, to keep the joy increasing?
Yeah, I'd say the two biggest things with this are one, writing it down. If you just think about things you're grateful for, that's not a bad thing. I don't not suggest doing that, but I think if you want it to stick, if you want to really see more benefits, there's a lot of research that suggests the power of writing things down is a lot greater than saying it out loud. So writing down the things you're grateful for is something that I think is really important. And then for me, I think this is something that a lot of people, I've done this with a lot of athletes, gratitude exercises. It's very easy to be very surface level with your gratitude or your affirmations. And that's something I try and encourage athletes to go a little deeper on. Like, for example, if I were to tell an athlete, okay, tell me three things you're grateful for, I could probably, before they answer, guess the three things they're going to say, right? It's going to be my family, it's going to be my dog, it's going to be my house. Like those are great things. It's good to be grateful for those things, but why are you grateful for those things? When you can attach the why to gratitude and even attach the why to affirmations, like I am good enough. Well, why am I good enough? Well, because I put in the work. I've actually tried. Like I've committed myself to this sport. I am good enough. Yeah, I actually do believe it now. You really start to see like one, your belief is greater, and two, you don't have to, convince yourself of like this is right. No, I do affirm it. No, you just believe it. It's something that is deeply rooted within you. So for me, I like to write it down in paragraph format. I don't like to use bullet points when we talk about gratitude or affirmations. I think being able to write it in a natural, free flowing way that allows you to go deeper into each thing. So, for example, if you're going to say, first thing you're grateful for, I'm grateful for my family, then I'm going to need at least one or two more sentences more on why you're grateful for your family, because then you start to really see and feel the power of the gratitude. The other thing is repeatability, being able to do it over and over and over and over and over again, especially with affirmations. A lot of people struggle with affirmations because they don't believe it right away. For example, if you're like, I'm going to succeed today, or I'm going to be great today, you might not believe that. But it's more about filling space in your brain than about believing it. If you can just fill that space in your brain right before your attempt or right before you're about to perform, that's time that you're saving with negative thoughts. Like you would have probably gone down a negative route. I would have if I didn't start affirming my beliefs or if I didn't say something in that moment. So I think within affirmation and gratitude, like you want to write those things down as much as possible. You want to go deeper into them. Don't want them to be really like surface level. And then especially with affirmations, you got to repeat them. They have to be said over and over and over and over and over again. And you'll see that with pro athletes. They'll write them down multiple times. So yeah, I'd say those are the most important things. Just continuing to hammer home on those things they will start to become a part of who you are. You'll start to ingrain the habit into you. It just won't happen right away. You got to trust the process and do it over and over again. Just like any skill, you got to put in the work. But the more intentional you are about that work, the faster you will see the results of it. Because I've felt that. I talked a lot about having fun. When I was in college, that's something that I started to do is like write down things I was grateful for, but not just the surface level. I really went deep into it. And I did like genuinely feel a difference. I felt a difference when I would step onto the court. I felt way more focused on gratitude. It was easier for me to see the things I was grateful for because I had put in the work before the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So, for the kids out there who are like, okay, I got to do imagery, I got to breathe, I got to do affirmations, I got to do gratitude, I got to fill my feed with good stuff. Do you have like a little daily practice that you recommend for athletes that's kind of digestible and repeatable, maybe from your experience or something you recommend to your athletes? What would you recommend for the perfectionist kid who's like, I need 3 hours, mom. I got to do my mental stuff. What do you recommend?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point as far as all of this stuff, right? It's not something you have to commit an hour of your day to. It's the power, and I think that's a testament to how powerful this stuff is you really only need to do it for if I've done it, maybe for 1 minute a day or 5 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day if you have time. Like if you have a performance, if you have a really, really big thing that you're anxious about, you need to put more energy into the mental game. So for me, a daily practice I have is definitely waking up and starting the day with some breathing. Like I just love to do that to get in the present moment. A lot of times when we wake up, we just go right to our cell phone or right to our phone, and that will the things that does to our brain it's scary. I'm not an expert on that stuff, so I'm not even going to go into it. But I know for a fact when I wake up and I start my day with just even 3 breaths, I'm talking 30 seconds out of my day to just be mindful, be present. I feel way more grounded for that morning. And that's something that I think is anyone can do. It's so simple, it's so quick. You can do it anywhere, anytime, any place. Just find moments to focus on your breath and to take 3 deep breaths, 3 mindful breaths, and not just breaths, but focusing on that breath, as I've made clear earlier. Like that's the number one thing with it. The imagery stuff, the visualization stuff, For me, that is not really, I don't use that as much anymore because I don't play. I'm not an athlete. So I would say that's a great thing to do. I would always use that as like a tool for pregame. So anytime I had a game coming up, anytime I had some moment that I was anxious about, anytime you're like, this could go wrong, or what if this goes wrong, that would be a great time to visualize. Visualize it going right, but also, yeah, visualize it going wrong and what you're going to do if it does go wrong. Um, and then with the gratitude stuff, that's something you can apply to the breathing. I like to do that in my morning sometimes as well. If I have a slow morning or I have nothing to do, I'll pull out my journal as well and just start writing. But letting yourself just giving yourself 2 to 3 minutes a day to just let yourself write about gratitude. There's a great exercise or a journaling exercise I've seen from Huberman about writing for 5 to 15 minutes straight. And his specifically was about a traumatic experience, but he mentioned in his podcast, you can do it with anything. You can do it with gratitude. So that's how I like to do it. I don't have a real, like a set plan with it. I just pull out my journal and I start writing. And I think that is a great outlet for me to kind of express my creativity and allow myself to just clear my mind, get everything out on the table. So I'd say those are the main ways I practice the mental skills now. But I want to remind all athletes, you can do this so quickly as long as you're just consistent in the sense of you're doing it once a day, or you're at least thinking about this stuff once a day. That's I think the number one thing. And then I actually want to talk about one more piece of this is like the perspective stuff. I think a lot of the mental training is, or people think of the mental game as like training, like you have to train your mind, train your mind, train your mind. So that means like, oh, you got to do breathing, you got to do visualization, imagery, you got to write down affirmations. But even just like reminding yourself to focus on what's in your control, or remind yourself to just, I got to be where my feet are. That has helped me almost as much as the exercises as well. Specifically on the first thing I said, focusing on what's in your control. So much of that is just due to a perspective shift, being able to shift your mindset and be aware of when you're focusing on something that's out of your control. That's something like I mentioned earlier, I really struggled with that. I mean, I still do. I focus on results a lot, but that's natural. Our brain is going to take us there all the time. So for me to just be aware of that and just have a moment where I'm like, oh, I'm focusing on a result right now. I need to focus on what's in my control. Even something as simple as that, I think helps reframe your mind and rewire your focus.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love talking about the adding the why to the gratitude, adding the why to the affirmations. I even love throwing a question out there, why am I so good at this? Even after you biff, why am I so good at this? Oh, because I'm resilient. Oh, because I get up fast. You're gonna fill in the answer to that when you start approaching affirmations with like that why question. I also think it's kind of funny when you're like, you crotch the beam and you're like, why am I so good at this? And you hop up and you're like, hey, but
Yeah.
there's your joy, right? You've brought the joy in, and then your mind's trying to complete that puzzle. Well, why am I? Oh, because I'm not fazed by stuff like this. That's why I'm so good. You're going to answer it naturally. I also love a mindful warm up. So when they're jogging, when they're running laps, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're counting your breaths. You're being where your feet are for whatever, 2 to 5 minutes every day. You could be spacing out, or you could be bringing your mind in and practicing that focus. So anytime that you have kind of a mindless warm up type activity, you can layer some mindfulness into it. That's one of my favorite ways to be like, yeah, you don't have 45 minutes morning and night to sit and meditate. I mean, the monks would argue with that. If you don't have time, then meditate for 2 hours, like until you realize that whatever. But yeah, you can always kind of layer it into what you're already doing. And I love the idea of wake up, take 3 breaths, and jot a little gratitude in your journal. And that idea of if you have a what if, imagine how you will handle it, and then imagine the ideal. What an amazing way to rewire your brain so that those what ifs actually become your little, like, don't forget to practice your mental training reminder, that little button of, oh, time to visualize. If you could create that 1-2 punch in your mind that every what if turns into a resilience and a triumph, ooh, you will be so confident, I feel like. So many good things. So you guys definitely find Joe Flow on Instagram. Did I get that right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. So much motivational content. Follow, follow, follow. And then you guys do your own research. Find the YouTube videos. Listen to affirmations. I used to wake up on my alarm clock to affirmations. like you can layer it in that way too, where you're like, Alexa, play affirmations for me at 7 a.m. And it'll just start being like, like just increasing the positive input can't hurt, right? So, yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, is the Instagram the best way to find you? Is there any place else they should find you?
Yeah, Instagram has my website on there as well. So it is
Perfect.
findjoyflow.com. It's the same as my Instagram. But yeah, that's how you can find me. That's how you can reach me. And yeah, always feel free. I love when athletes DM me random questions. Like I love this stuff. So being able to just talk about it with anyone, I'm happy to have a discussion or help in any way I can.
Amazing. So nice to meet you, Joey Hewitt, everybody. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rebecca.